We just had another round of big tech hearings over at Congress, and I'm here to tell you it's all a sham, it's complete showmanship, and it will continue to be until, in the very least, they pull Andrew Torba, CEO of Gab, in to testify. Because Gab is the single biggest case for censorship. It's the case like no other that demonstrates that big tech colludes together in order to censor people. In this case, basically all the big tech companies have all worked together to try and shut down Gab. To its credit, Gab continues to exist. For those who don't know, it's a free speech site similar to Twitter or Facebook, or rather it's what they should be but aren't. In any case, Gab is also the biggest argument showing antitrust violations by Apple and Google. You see, Gab, in order to make it easier for people to access the site on their phones, they decided to put out an app. It's the cool thing to do now, right? But in order to distribute an app, you have to go through the app stores. Apple's app store for the Apple products, iPhones. And for Google or Android phones, you go through the Google Play Store. You're probably familiar with one or both of these. That's the way that these programs are distributed. But Gab was banned from both. Gab didn't do anything. They didn't have any sort of Trojan inside of their software. Instead, they were discriminated against because they allow people to speak freely up to the limits of United States law, and that is all. And neither Google nor Apple felt that they could or would allow that. Free speech is a big problem for big tech, it turns out. Now, in the case of Apple software, there's no workaround for that. If you're on an iPhone and you want to install, for example, the app made by Gab, even if you get your hands on the file that would install, it's not going to work. Apple prevents it. This is what I mean by an antitrust violation. These companies own all of these different phones. The vast majority of phones either use Apple or Android, and then they, together, cut Gab out of the vast majority of phones so that people can't easily get to Gab. That's collusion in order to kick out a competitor of sorts. By the way, if you use Apple products, you're just a slave. You really are. Just don't use Apple, really. They control what you do, what you see. Tim Cook bragged about this on stage. It's not even something that they hide, it's something they're proud of. But all these different big tech leaders, they lie in Congress, and they never face imprisonment. And this is what frustrates me about these so-called hearings. Because do we even need them? Let's be honest for a minute. Do we need hearings to see that big tech is censoring conservatives and libertarians and various decent people, Christians in the case of Facebook? Do we need hearings for that? Not really. Look at just recent developments. Squarespace, a company that allows people to create websites, they shut down the website of a bunch of doctors because those doctors were talking about a certain drug that I'm not allowed to name on some of these sites where this video is distributed. They were talking about how that drug helps in patients who have a certain virus. You see how I can't speak freely? Those doctors can't speak freely either because of a conglomeration of big tech. Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter, Squarespace all work together to silence a video by a bunch of doctors. As a collective, they think they represent some kind of a truth council. It's ironic. And there's a medical cover-up going on right now that's getting people killed. People are literally dying because they're not allowed to have access to science, because there is no scientific process when there is no debate. Like those on the left scream about science, how conservatives just hate science. They won't allow a bunch of doctors to talk about what works for them in their practices. They have the nerve to talk about science. They think that if they can create enough disaster, enough deaths, that they'll win against Trump, and they're okay with that. They're willing to kill their fellow countrymen to steal the election. I can't think of a bigger example of treason, to be quite honest with you. But you look at other instances of censorship. How about the fact that Breitbart, a known conservative news outlet, has been purged from Google results if you search for anything related to Joe Biden? Yes, Joe Biden followed by anything else on Google won't bring up Breitbart. Doesn't matter that Breitbart is a huge site. I don't mean that it's a little buried and it's on page 2 in the search results. I mean zero. Zero results for Breitbart. Breitbart just doesn't come up. Breitbart is buried, and this is according to Google's own data. They're engaged in election interference to the extreme, attempting to give places like Breitbart, and of course that's just an example of one case, where they're giving an internet death penalty of sorts. Do we need hearings? The White House some time ago asked for people to give them proof of various acts of censorship. They set up a web page where people could report such things. Then they did nothing about it. And now I see these headlines about how these hearings went on and Republicans were roasting big tech. Well, what does roasting really mean? It means they criticized. Maybe they yelled occasionally. But that doesn't matter, because the big tech people don't care about looking bad. They don't care about being shamed. They don't care about looking dishonorable. If they did, we wouldn't even be in this mess. We wouldn't, and yet here we are. They need to start losing their immunity that they have from prosecution if they're going to act like they are publishers, which they are at this point because they censor what's on their platforms. They carefully curate what is allowed on their websites, and as such, they shouldn't be defended in the way that they are. This is Section 230, I talked about it before. President Trump, yes, he did just sign an executive order telling the FCC to look into this, to look into the censorship. But aren't we past looking into it? It's so obvious that both censorship and election fraud, election tampering are going on. Do we need to look into it some more? Analyze it some more? We're 3 months out from the election and you have major companies with power that other governments could only dream of engaging in election tampering. Crimes are being committed repeatedly. You have people lying to Congress. I mean, that's the only point of the hearings to me, is you can see that these people are lying straight to the face of these members of Congress, and maybe we could actually, charge them for that, since that's a crime. But I haven't heard of any arrests. In fact, these people don't expect there to be any arrests. And this country, the United States, has had a long history of liberal speech policies, and that's a good thing. But these people are plotting to overthrow the legitimate government of the United States. That's not their free speech. That's a crime of the tallest order. And it's time that something was done.
You have no place on our platforms. You have no home here.
Wait, if you enjoyed that video, please remember to like and share. I can't grow without you. Also, if you want to be reliably notified of new videos, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're able to support the production of these videos, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe at Subscribestar, or maybe get one of the healthier products, or even get some merch.